Hello and welcome back to my writing blog series. This is writing blog number 45. Despite the number, I recently started writing a new story, and that is Nature's Culling. My novel is going to have about 27 chapters because I follow the 27 chapter method. Maybe I will have a bit more than 27 or maybe I will have a bit less, but I usually write about 28. I tend to add stuff onto the stories I write because I have an outline and then I think of things along the way and then I kind of beef up the story, so to speak, and then the story gets longer and it has more chapters. But if I end up with about 27 chapters or more, then it will be a while until I get to finish writing this first draft. And that is why I'm hoping to do 2 or 3 chapters per writing vlog and not just 1 or 2. If I only write 1 or 2 chapters per week, every time that I do a writing vlog, it's once a week, more or less, then it will be a while until I get to finish this draft, and I just want to draft it so I can put it aside and then work on something else, and I want to get going. If I'm going to reach my goal of writing the set number of novels this year that I have planned on writing, then I need to be productive. I'm filming this on the 1st of April 2026. Despite the date, I'm not going to make any April's Fools in this video because I don't think it would make much sense because this video is going up about 2 weeks later. When I record this, it's April 1st, but it won't be April 1st at all once this video is published, so I will refrain from doing any pranks. I might be a bit of a prankster just like Kenny in my novel, but I usually don't want to make April's Fool's jokes or make pranks on people if I want to be taken seriously. If I make a joke, then I want it to be clear that it is a joke and not just something that I say and then people will actually believe that and then I have to correct it afterward. I aspire to be truthful and honest about my writing and my writing process and everything else that I do. So in order for that to make sense and to be taken seriously, I want to not make jokes. For this writing vlog, I'm going to work on chapter 4. I will write all of chapter 4. If all goes well, I should at least be able to write chapter 4 for this writing vlog. But I also hope that I will be able to write all of chapter 5. But I'm thinking that today I will just write chapter 4, make some notes about it, and then go straight into chapter 5 and write that, and then get back to you once I have written both chapters, so that I will have to sum up what I have written in those chapters instead of getting back to you after the first chapter or the first in this writing vlog and then get back to you one more time after I have written the second chapter for today. I hope that's okay that I do it like that. I think it fits my workflow today because if I have to take a longer break to gather my thoughts and then do a video and then write some more and then do a video, then it might take a bit longer than if I just focus on writing and then make one video afterward. So far, I have written chapters 1, 2, and 3, and according to my outline, chapter 4 is going to have the story's reaction plot point. This reaction plot point is a follow-up on the inciting incident and the immediate reaction to that. So first we have the status quo, then something happens, and then there's an immediate reaction to that, and then a further reaction to it. So if all goes well, I'm going to write this reaction chapter now or in a minute once I'm done recording this section. My original plot or plot outline for chapter 4, I had written that in Danish, but I have made a rough translation of that into English and I have adjusted it a bit to reflect what it would have been if I hadn't thought of something else that I'm going with instead. But the original plot outline for chapter 4 was, fortunately, they make the right decision in not letting in these people, these 4 people that come in the car. It was lucky that they didn't get close to these people or let them into the house, because it turns out that one of them has gotten the virus. So I'm going to scrap that. I'm not going to write that, but instead I will shift the focus in this and the next chapter to be about Walt and Melody. Before I started writing the first chapter, I had this idea that Kenny and Penny need to have employees at this ranch, because otherwise it's too much work for just two people. I have talked about it before in this writing blog series, but I'm going to go with this idea about Walt and Melody. I previously talked about one of them getting sick and dying and the other one leaving. And so this chapter 4 is going to be very expensive, because it's going to include this about Walt and Melody. I'm thinking that Walt needs to go somewhere because he's got some serious matter that he needs to take care of. I'm thinking that he has to go to the doctor, even though there's a big risk that the doctor is sick as well, but he needs to get some immediate medical help for something. Maybe he has some kind of heart disease or something, I'm not sure. Or maybe he has gotten a heart attack and needs to have something checked out. I don't know. I haven't gone into specifics in my outline. I'm just thinking that Walt needs to go to the doctor to get some medical help in some way. That is not good, because it turns out that he gets infected. I think it's more important that Walt and Melody are affected, because they are closer to my main characters and they live at the ranch, and thereby they pose a more immediate threat than these strangers that come in their car, and maybe they're sick and maybe they will get infected, but Kenny and Penny have already shown that they're very careful, and so it would be strange if they get infected by one of these strangers. So having someone who lives kind of under the same roof as them be sick with this virus is more crucial, or it's more dangerous for them, because there's a higher risk that they will get sick too. But chapter 4, if it goes as I have planned or as I have outlined, then Walt will get this sickness and he will die, but Melody will be with him, take care of him, because they live together in that same house on the same piece of land as Kenny and Penny, and Kenny and Penny live in their own house. Maybe it would make sense if Melody comes over and lives with Kenny and Penny in the bigger house, and then Walt is in isolation. But maybe he doesn't know that he's sick until he has already exposed Melody. And so she figures that she might as well stay with him, because either she has already gotten it or maybe she's immune. I don't know if she is immune or what. But after Walt is dead, I'm thinking that Melody is going to leave the ranch, not because he hates Kenny or Penny, because they wanted Walt to be in isolation, but because she wants to go home with her family. Maybe she's sick and maybe she isn't, but she seeks out her own family because she wants to be with them while this virus rages, even though it's probably dangerous for her to go back into the city. But either she's sick already and then it doesn't make a difference, or she's immune. Some people have to be immune to this virus, or else it would just kill everyone eventually. But I also have the plan that there's going to be a vaccine, a cure for this virus. But that will come later, after Walt is dead and after Melody leaves. So chapter 4 is going to be pretty expensive. So Walt has to go somewhere, gets the disease, comes back but doesn't know that he's sick. They take precautions, but he's living in that same house with Melody. And so when he gets symptoms, then they have to stay away from him. Kenny and Penny keep a distance, but Melody is already with him, and so she decides to stay with him until the bitter end. And then she leaves. I don't think that there's much telling of this story or this part of the story that I can do, because I mainly stick with, or I stick with my main characters, which are Kenny and Penelope. But communication with them has to take place in some other kind of form. And I'm thinking that they have a landline or cell phones. They at least have cell phones so they can call each other and then hear what's going on and how they're doing. So, but a chapter of my main characters speaking on the phone with Walt and Melody isn't going to be that exciting, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to go about this. Maybe I should just write about how Walt comes back and Kenny and Penny talking about how it's very sad and bad that he needed to go, even though there's a big risk that he catches this disease himself. So when he comes back, they're open to having him come back, but he needs to stay in that house and be isolated. They can kind of give him food, but not come close to him. And Melody has to be very careful if she goes between the houses, and so she kind of just needs to stay in that house with Walt, I imagine. And so for chapter 5, the original plot outline I had for that was also in Danish, and that was something about this other group of people getting infected too. The previous chapter was supposed to be about one of them getting sick, and then the chapter 5 was supposed to be about the others getting infected too in that group, and then Kenny and Penny forcing them or threatening them to leave their ranch because they don't want to get sick. They don't want to risk it, and they have to stay at a distance to not catch the virus. And it's not because they're cruel and careless, but because they have to take care of themselves so they can take care of the farm and they can survive. But now that I'm changing the focus of these few chapters, then it needs to be a bit different, because Kenny and Penny aren't that heartless. They aren't that afraid of getting sick, or maybe they are, but they don't want to shun them. They don't want to make them leave. Walt and Melody are welcome to stay at the ranch, but they have to stay in that house and keep a distance and be very, very careful with what they do and what they touch and things like that. So they can stay there, but until they either get over the virus or it turns out that they didn't have the virus after all, it's better to be safe and just stay away from each other. Kenny and Penny aren't really that sociable, but they really care about their employees and they want the best for them. And so I'm also thinking that they won't force Melody to leave, and it's something that she decides to do. Not because she's thinking that she isn't welcome, but she decides that she'd rather be with her family if she hasn't got that long to live. And Kenny and Penny are going to be alone at the ranch and do everything on their own. But maybe that's another reason for them to let this young woman and her boyfriend and her sister and brother stay in that house. So once they're hopefully in the clear and haven't got the virus anymore, if they survive, then they can help with the ranch. I'm also thinking that because everything is running amok and people are getting sick and dying left and right, then there won't be that much traffic, or there won't be that many people that come to the ranch to buy groceries and to buy things like meat and milk and eggs from them, or their crops, because they have a lot. This ranch is their livelihood, and so they need to have extra to be able to sell stuff to locals. Now that people are staying away and they need to get their food in other places, maybe they have to get something, of course, but maybe the demand isn't that big anymore and people choose to stay at home and just order stuff online if there's someone who wants to deliver it. Basically, Kenny and Penny are going to cut down on what they produce. Maybe Kenny and Penny will get rid of some of their cattle and just tone it down so they don't overproduce. They have to be able to survive, but if people aren't coming to their ranch to buy stuff from them, then they don't get any money. They still need to get money to pay their bills, but other than that, they can basically get by on their own because they have meat and water from the well and they can produce power. I also have this idea that they have a windmill and solar panels on their roof, and they have a generator as well, so they can put some kind of fuel into that, and then they have power if the windmill and or the solar panels malfunction or something. So it's very crucial that they can still pump up water or get water for their cattle. But yes, that was a side note. Basically, chapter 4 and chapter 5 are going to be very expansive, and a lot of things are going to happen in those, so I'm worried that they're going to be very long chapters. And maybe I won't have time enough today to write both of them after all, but here's hoping. I hope that I can be very productive and then write both chapters and then come back to you and tell you how it went with both of those chapters, but I should at least be able to write chapter 4. I'll get to work and then get back to you. Hello again. It's several hours later and it's late afternoon now. It's the same day and I have written chapter 4 and chapter 5. I spent about 1 hour and 45 minutes writing chapter 4, and in total for that chapter I wrote 3,732 words. So that's a decent number of words, I think. It's a pretty long chapter, but it's not too long, so I think that's okay. Chapter 4 consists of one long scene and a short scene. Basically, 3 things happen in the long scene in chapter 4. The first thing is that Walt has gone to the doctor. There was something important that he needed to see the doctor for, and he had to go even though the doctor is quite likely sick with the virus as well. But he needed to go to the doctor to get some medical attention. I'm not quite sure what is wrong with him, but it's something about his heart. He has some kind of heart malfunction. I don't know what that is called, and I don't know the specifics. It was just something important that I needed for him to have, so he would have to go out and see the doctor, even though that was risky because the doctor might have this virus. And the scene starts with Kenny and Penelope talking about Walt and that he had to leave, even though it's a risk. It's a risk for them, but when he comes back, he has to be in isolation. And then the second thing that happens is that Melody comes over to get some things that they need, so they can stay over in that house for a couple of weeks until Walt has recovered from the virus, if he has gotten the virus. He needs to be virus-free until he can go out again and do the things he usually does. And even though Melody takes the risk that she will get sick, she says to Kenny and Penny that she might as well risk getting the virus from Walt because she intends to leave. She intends to go back to her family and stay with them once Walter has gotten over the disease. She wants to be there for him, but she also wants to go back. And then later in the chapter she reveals that actually her parents have got this virus, so she wants to go and be with them, and it might as well be Walt that infects her than her own parents. The third thing that happens in chapter 4 is that Walt returns to the ranch. They hear the car coming up to the house, and then Melody says, "Oh, that's my cue," and then she takes this box of things that Penelope has prepared for her and she goes back outside. And then Kenny and Penelope watch Walt and Melody walk into that other house together. And then there's a time skip, a chapter break in chapter 4, and I only have a page and a half or something like that. And what happens in that part of the story is that it's some time later and now Walt is dead. So there's a black hearse that's leaving with Walter in the back, dead. So Kenny and Penelope watch this car leave the ranch with Walt. And Melody is there as well, but she keeps a distance because she might have got this virus that killed Walt. And so she doesn't want to come close to them, but Penny and Kenny don't want her to get close to them either, even though they want to be there for her and comfort her, but they want to comfort each other as well. They're sad that Walt is gone, but life goes on. I didn't state that directly in the chapter, but maybe it's implied that they have to just keep on going. Walt is dead, and apparently he had some other health issues that he didn't tell them about, but that Melody knew about. But now that Walt isn't there anymore, then Melody figures that, oh, her work there is done, even though Kenny and Penny might still need her help at the ranch. She's going to leave. So she says, oh, I have already packed some bags, so she goes to get them, and then she drives off. And Kenny and Penny walk back inside the house, and they're sad that Walt is dead. But I didn't really incorporate anything else into that chapter. I think it was expansive enough already. But Kenny and Penny walk back into the house, and then their life goes on, even though it's sad. The circumstances are sad. Melody has left and Walt is dead, and so they have to keep on going and taking care of this ranch on their own. But it's in the fall, and so there's not that much to do as in the spring and the summertime. But they also talk to Melody about her having the opportunity to come back and live with them again. Once things have returned to normal, hopefully, then she can come back to the ranch and then pick up, not where she left off, but continue working for them, because she's welcome there still, of course. This chapter was pretty expensive, as I said, and it included a lot of things. And I just had this idea, this outline for this chapter, and I figured that, oh, it's a lot to put inside one chapter, and no matter what I wrote and how I wrote it, I would need to have a chapter break, because Walt needed to get sick. Sorry, Walt, but he needed to get sick, and then other things had to happen as well. Maybe minor things, but Melody had to leave too, and there had to be this time skip because Walt didn't die right away. The virus needed to do its thing, and then he died from that a while later. So the time skip says a week later or something like that. Maybe I will change it, but I don't know. Even though I included a lot of different things in this chapter 4, I think I did a pretty good job at writing a scene that encompasses all those things. Or one long scene and a small scene. So I included the things I wanted to include in this chapter. I think it went all right with that. Okay, and so for chapter 5, it took me about 1 hour and a half to write chapter 5. And in total for that chapter I wrote 3,604 words. That's a decent number of words as well. So it's a bit shorter than the other one. They are more or less the same length, and I think it's pretty standard length for what I write. Some chapters might be longer than that and some might be shorter, but I think it's average for me when I write stories. I expect that coming chapters will be quite short because things need to happen quickly, and I don't want to spend a lot of words describing everything that happens, so there will be some tell in some chapters, I think, in order for me to move the plot along. Chapter 5 was one long scene, so it's pretty standard for me as well, because most of the chapters I write are one long scene. So chapter 4 that I wrote earlier today broke the rule, so to speak, because I had one long scene and then a short scene. If I need to, then I will make chapter breaks, and then I will add something onto a chapter after a chapter break if something else needs to happen that's too little to take up an entire chapter. And so that's what I did for chapter 4, because I didn't want to save that part about him dying and them having to say goodbye to Melody. I didn't want to take that and use it for an entire chapter, and I didn't want to just skip it and just sum it up kind of at the beginning of the next chapter. And so it needed to happen, and it needed to be out of the way before the next thing happens in the story, which is what happens in chapter 5. Earlier I said that chapter 5 is one long scene, but if or when I edit it and want to whittle down the number of words, then I might need to cut out a paragraph or two, or I don't know, a page or two to shorten the story, because there might be something that I could take out, but I'm not sure. I don't think that I wasted that many words, so to speak, because it doesn't take that long for my main character to discover something and then go and talk to Kenny about it. So the idea I had for this new outline was that it was Kenny who discovers that there's someone living in this house that is supposed to be empty. And so I changed my mind about that. I figured it was better if it was Penny who sees that there's someone in this house. And then she goes and gets Kenny and talks to him, because she isn't that assertive and she isn't that tough. So she does not want to confront this person in the house on her own, because she doesn't think that she's strong enough and intimidating enough for that other person to leave. But yes, what happens in chapter 5 is that Penny is chasing a chicken. It's 2 weeks later. Walt died and Melody left, but time goes on and things need to progress, and so they keep on living their lives. But it's an ordinary task for Penelope, because she's taking care of the chickens. And one of the chickens has escaped the pen, and so she's chasing it around on the ranch. And she ends up on the side or on the back of this other house, and then she accidentally sees a person inside the house. And that is scary and surprising to her, because the house was supposed to be empty. So she has a lot of thoughts about this, and she's panicking and she's scared and she's worried, because what is this person doing here, and what if she does not want to leave, and what if her boyfriend is there as well, and Penny doesn't think that she can scare them off. And so I spent a bit of words or a bit of page time to describe how she hurries back to the house, or she actually goes out to the field to try and see if she can spot Kenny, but she can't see him. And so she goes to the house. She tries to call him too, but he doesn't answer. So she goes back to the house and waits for him to come, and then when he comes in, they talk about what has happened, and Kenny is sure that they need to make them leave. And so he gets a gun. He gets a gun from a safe upstairs in the big house that they live in. But I also mentioned that there's a shotgun in a safe in that other house where Walt lived. I'm following Penny in chapter 5. I'm pretty close to her, and I can't read her mind exactly, but I tell the story from her point of view. So she thinks about this, and she's worried that maybe this other person that lives in this house where Walt lived has gotten access to the safe and has gotten this shotgun. So that won't be good. So they don't really have any leverage if both sides have a gun, and then they can't really force the others to leave. But now that Kenny is armed with this gun, he feels more secure or self-assured, I guess. I'm still following Penny's POV, and so I don't go into Kenny's head or follow him that closely, but I follow Penny, who's observing Kenny, and she's like, oh, he's got this and he's going to make them leave, and she's not fond of him getting the gun, but if that's necessary, then that's the way it has to be. But they go over to this other house, the secondary house on the ranch, and then shout to the person inside the house, and it turns out that the young woman is not alone. Her boyfriend is there, and her sister and brother are there as well, her two youngest siblings. And so they have this back and forth with what they're doing there and why they're here, and then Kenny reveals that actually the man, or one of the people who lived in that house, died from the virus, and the house might be riddled with bacteria from the virus, and so they have already been exposed. But then the young guy says, actually, we've been living here for 1 week and you haven't noticed us until today, so we've been plenty exposed to this virus, and so we've probably already gotten it. But then Kenny and Penny have this dialogue between them. They keep their voices low. They talk to the others too, but Penny is like, okay, come on, can't we let them stay? And then with a single nod and a small smile, she lets him know that, okay, we can let them stay. It's better to just make a deal with them and make this arrangement that they stay in the house and don't leave at all for 2 weeks or something like that, so they don't go out and spread the disease and infect others, and so they have to stay in that house. But then Penny says that she will bring them whatever they need. As soon as Kenny finds out that these two young children are there as well, he gets kind of, okay, whoops, maybe I shouldn't be that threatening, and then he puts the gun away, and so it eases off the tension, and then this young guy is pretty relaxed about it, and he makes a joke, and they talk a bit about it, and Penny says that, oh, of course, we probably have everything you need. This young guy wants to know about personal protection in some special way, and then Penny assures him that, oh, they can spare personal protection. It leads to that young guy, I named him Ryan, and the young woman, I named her Charlotte, and the two kids go back into the house and then leave Kenny and Penelope alone, and then Kenny and Penny are just kind of, okay, if we're going to have a family of our own, then we might as well get started with this. And so it's kind of a joke. I ease off the tension at the end of the chapter because there's this thing about the personal protection. They have this talk, and it also eases off the pressure of the young guy and the young woman and the kids. I'm hoping and thinking that the kids don't really know what's going on, but they're just happy that, okay, that's the man and the woman who gave me those bandages. They got the medic kit from them, and the girl remembers it. And so, okay, you are kind. It's nice of you to let us stay here. And they kind of end up actually becoming friends, or not friends, but they're not enemies at the end of this chapter. And a bit of joking around helps to make that happen, I think. A lot of things happen in chapter 5 as well. So the two chapters are almost equally long, but in total I wrote 7,336 words. And in total I spent 3 hours and 15 minutes approximately writing all of this today. I have had some breaks in between, and I've been recording too, so that is not included in the word count or the time I spent on working on this today. But when I only look at the time I have spent actually writing and how many words I wrote, I have a word count of 2,257 words per hour. So I don't know what that is per minute, but I could easily do the math. I just can't do the math in my head. But I think that's a decent number of words, and I think it also went pretty well, pretty smoothly with writing today. So I think the outline helps me a lot because I know what I'm going to write when I sit down to write, except for when I change my mind about something. I have already strayed from the original outline because I wanted it to be about these strangers that come and then they come back, and then one of them is infected, and then the others are infected too. I changed that to focus on Walt and Melody. And I think that affects my main characters more. And this thing about the virus and infecting people, it didn't need to take up that much room in this story because I want to focus on what's going to happen otherwise. So now that these 4 strangers are living at the ranch in this house, and once they're clear of this virus, time has to pass, and then either they get sick and then they might die, or if they get sick and are immune, then they survive and then they can go on living. But I don't know if they can still carry the disease and then infect others even though they are immune. I'm not quite sure how that will work, but it's fiction. Maybe it's different in my story, but in any case, I think I've done a pretty good job today at writing these 2 chapters, and a lot of things have happened, and it propels the story into the next part. Already in the next chapter, chapter 6, it's going to be about this virus not being that bad after all. But that is going to be in the next writing blog. I don't know if I'm going to do 1 or 2 chapters in the next one. But yes, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this writing blog, and I hope you will watch the next one. Until then, take care. Thank you for watching.